So why did Darwin's theory take off so much? It's weird, man. You know, I think about this. My daughter, and she's in a psychology class, and it's interesting because they're talking about Freud, and we know that Freud stuff is bunk. We know that Freud can't be replicated. It's just some guy who came up with this idea that somehow had great marketing. Darwin's the same thing. It's just as interesting as all can be how this becomes notorious as established fact. You know, Freud stuff, what they id. I mean, I was studying that when I was a kid, and I don't know, what do you do, 10th grade, 11th grade? I said, this whole thing is stupid, man. I knew it back then. I know it now. C.S. Lewis had a pretty big takedown on Freud, or there's a book talking about C.S. Lewis and Freud. It was fantastic. It's probably been 20 years since I read that. I just remember, I said, man, why is that Freud, Darwin, all these other, like, there's just certain people, Michael Mann and the climate scientist, what is it that made these guys, who's the guy, Stephen Jay Gould, something like that, he's actually got more legitimacy than some of these other guys, I'll tell you, in my opinion. Anyway, but why did some of these guys get traction and others don't? Have they sold their, it's like the Robert Johnson Crossroads, where you're selling your soul for fame. I sell my soul for rock and roll. Is that what happens in science, that they just got to be notorious? So they're going to sell their soul to be considered the kings of that aspect. I mean, it's incredible when you think about it. I'm just drawing blanks on these other guys. Ansel Keys, for instance. I mean, I get why because Eisenhower, when he had his heart attack, his chief physician was tight with Ansel Keys, and so Ansel Keys told him to eat. The reason he had a heart attack is the meats he was eating and all this stuff. I kind of get that. That in of itself makes sense. But, some of these guys, like, I just don't get it. And I think what happened was, a lot of people will pin the Vatican as, the Illuminati, so to speak, where all the cabal gathers. I don't think it's the Vatican so much. It might well be. I don't know. It might well be. I think it started in the liberal Protestant movement of the early to mid 1800s, and you had a lot of liberal. Kind of led to the Waldorf school and all that stuff. I mean, it's very, very interesting when you read this. But it's basically came out of church, Protestant churches in particularly, that essentially disclaimed Jesus. You see what I'm saying? Basically Jesus was a good guy, but a God he is not. It's interesting. And the reason I think it came from the Protestant churches is because they could become essentially men of the cloth, if that makes sense. They could say, hey, look at me, I'm a pastor. Have reverence among society. No different than the pedos in the Catholic Church. If you're a pede, or pedo as they say in Britain, where are you going to go? You're going to become a priest, man. You know what I'm saying? It only makes sense. If you're a liberal and you want to get some credibility, what do? You become a man of the cloth. And then you say, hey, I am here, and you can't doubt me. It's like Fauci. If you doubt Fauci, you doubt science. It's the same thing. Anyway, so they had some ability to generate traction. They gathered with other liberal people, liberal-minded people of the cloth, who they weren't of the cloth, obviously, but that was a way for them to capture, to be authority. And they were able to convince a large segment of the population that God is dead, essentially. You know what I'm saying? Was it Nietzsche? Nietzsche? Yeah. Didn't he say that? God is dead? One of those guys. Who's the other guy? Nietzsche. Obviously, Marx, Nietzsche, and the other guy, I'm drawing a blank. I see his name. I almost want to say Spengler, but it's not Spengler. I forgot who it was. By the way, God is dead. And so somehow that's able to take traction because at that point, probably after the Civil War, in America, it's kind of like what happened after World War I. It was so gruesome and so evil that people said, if there is a God, why would he allow this to happen? This insane destruction of humanity. The Somme, it's just all over. And then you look at World War II in Dresden, you're like, just the insane destruction of human beings can easily turn people to turn away from God. Because like, why would this have happened if there was a righteous God? Why is he allowing so many good things, bad things to happen to so many good people? And I don't have an answer for that, I'll tell you right now. But I think it might have been what happened after Civil War, maybe. Especially the northeast parts, I don't know. You know, because that's where the mainline churches are. And then, well, hell, yeah, I don't know. I would think. I'm not sure about Catholics. I mean, we know Jesuits, the same thing. A lot of Jesuits were just, you know, men of the cloth who are essentially Marxist. We know that for a fact. That's not debatable. I just don't think it's the Vatican per se. I don't think it's even the Protestant liberalism. I think it just had to do with people who saw destruction and they said God doesn't exist because a good God would never allow this to happen. And as such, they said, I'm going to preach a different form of theism, if that makes sense. Where we say we're going to be like a red letter Christian, if you're familiar with that. Basically, we follow the words of Jesus and nothing else. The words of Jesus are written and read in the Bible, so anything else from Paul, for instance, we're not going to pay attention to. You know, because Paul didn't write the Gospels. We're only going to listen to the Gospels. And of course, these guys say Jesus was just a hippie, essentially. Just a hippie, man. And I think that took over. And it happened to coincide with the fact they're like, we can't allow this destruction to continue. And it's continuing because of nationalism, you know, religion. And so what we're going to do is we're going to preach against this stuff. And we happen to coincide with Darwin, Freud, and we're going to promote the hell of these people basically to say, there is no God. There isn't any. And as such, you don't have to live in fear anymore of being ordered around by a tyrant who won't protect you anyway. Because look at what happened with World War I, Civil War, and whatnot. It's just a theory I have. Because, you know, the idea that Darwin... it's just so silly. It's just so silly. And yet, like, we're talking about Decoe, talk about Stanford prison experiment. I said, that's been debunked, man. It's fake. And sure, it's fake. They weren't even saying that in her class, though. You know what I'm saying? They weren't saying that in the class. So everyone thinks the Stanford prison experiment is legit. It's not. Absolutely it's not. It's fake. I mean, did they conduct it? Yes. Did it prove anything? Of course not. I forgot what the other one was, the obedience to authority, basically we're all Nazi. Was that fake? Of course. Same thing. Did they actually do a study? Yes. Did it turn out the way the notoriety led? No, of course not. It's no different than the 97% scientists believe climate change or global warming, it was global warming back then, was caused from man. AGW, that's just fake. It's no different than 80% of retirees are going to run out of money in retirement. It's just all headline stuff, fear porn. And I get that. I mean, I get that's how you get notoriety. That's how you get funding. You see what I'm saying? All that stuff. Actually, I was reading an article today. There's some foundation that had give Harvard $5 million to study wealth inequality. I'm like, well, if you're going to study wealth inequality, why the hell would you give it to Harvard, man? Jeez. Give it to freaking some community college, you freaking thinks. And it's funny, too, because a guy who, I forgot the name of the foundation, who's the foundation's named after, the rich guy, he founded a business. He got his wealth by founding a business out of Bermuda. After, of course, he was on the CFTC, the Commodities Futures Trade Commission. He was appointed by the Massachusetts head of insurance by Dukakis in the late 70s. Appointed by Carter to be head of the CFTC. So it's just all playing on there. This is how it happens. They get famous in government, they get rich outside. That's what liberals do all the time. What conservatives do is they get rich and outside, and then they want to be part of the power. And they want to be loved by everybody, so they become like a Mitt Romney. They use their money through influence. Liberals use their influence for money. which is worse? Well, liberals, of course, just because liberals are worse. But, you know, they're basically two cuts of the same cloth, the cloth there. It was just interesting, you know, when I think about it. It's like, so you have these guys desperate for exposure, desperate to be seen, like the ways of the world were bad before. So we got to change, and we're going to change by basically kicking God to the side, and a new human will come to be, a new superhuman being of love and charity. As I open a side hustle in Bermuda for tax benefits and give millions of dollars to Harvard to study wealth inequality. Crazy. And I guarantee that dude is like, man, I don't want God to exist, because if God exists, I'm going to have some explaining to do, if that makes sense. No different than the pedos in the Catholic Church, no different than the rich or the Protestant liberals who said, oh man, I don't want to follow these rules of God. I just want to go out there and frolic in the park, if you know what I'm saying. All right, thoughts. What are your thoughts? Just something to think about when I'm taking my walk. See ya.